What's up guys, and welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today I'm going to be showing you a bunch of tips, tricks, hacks to make the Novation Circuit more powerful or faster to use. A bunch of these are tips that I've discovered over the course of making a ton of music with the circuit, and I also reached out to folks on the Novation Circuit Facebook group and got a couple more to add to this list, and I'll shout a couple people out in particular when I get to those tricks. So I'm going to start things off somewhat basic, and then we're going to ramp up either the difficulty or the obscurity as we go along. So be sure to stay tuned to the end, and I'll put a list of all of the tricks in the description. To start off pretty basic, this is something that I think is an underutilized feature of the Novation Circuit, and it's using the Save As feature. Because you can save a session into a slot, that means to duplicate a session, you hold down Save and hit a different slot. So right now, I just saved it in its original slot. So here's the session. So this is a nice breakdown, but I want it to go into a gigantic drop. So what I can do is hit save and then choose another slot, and that duplicates that session. So now I can make a drastic change, say bring in the kick drum, change out the synth. Save that, and this brings me to my second tip, which is if you don't want to go all the way to the sessions view and root for your session, but you want to just save quickly while you're still thinking about it, just double tap the save button and that will save it in the slot you're already in right there instantaneously, which is a nice little factor to add speed to your workflow. So now, because you can use sessions as patterns, which some of you may already know, we're building. Launch that. And that's a really effective way to create interest in a song, because the circuit, since it only has 2 synth tracks and 4 drum tracks, can get a little limited, which can limit how much you can do in a song unless you use the saving and save as feature and the session switching features all in conjunction to make for a bunch of beat switch ups. For the next little trick, I want to shout out Sebastian for making me aware of this one. I didn't realize you could do this, which is maybe surprising that I wasn't aware that you could do this, but if you want to make a really quick change in a different window and then just come right back, you can hold down the selection for that window. So for instance, say I'm playing this, and I want to mute the hi-hat, but I want to do that very quickly. What I can do is, so here's my mixer, but I don't want to switch back and forth. So let's do this. Hold that down, make that change, come back. So if you're trying to work incredibly quickly, holding this down, making the change, and then letting it go again will do the trick. And this works for anything. You can temporarily jump to any window in the Novation Circuit by holding the button that activates it down, make your change, and then immediately leave by just releasing it again. So if you want to stay on that window, you just press it. If you want to briefly switch to it, hold it down, let it go. The next tip is more of a sound design based one, and it has to do with the slapback delay. You've got a bunch of delay settings here, and a lot of them work like a standard echo, echo, echo. This one is a slapback ping pong delay, which means the delay kicks in pretty much immediately, and it bounces back and forth in your ears, and it's slightly modified in each ear. So let me just demonstrate this. Let me get rid of all the width on the synth patch, and then get rid of all the delay so you can hear what that sounds like. And I'm gonna mute everything else. That's the synth patch. And now listen to what happens as I bring in the very first delay, aka the slapback delay. That's obviously too much, but hopefully you get the idea. It adds not only a nice width, but this metallic characteristic that I've really been a fan of lately. There's a lot of kind of pop, hip hop, and electronic production that leans into this slapback delayed, intentionally messy and metallic production, like some of Charlie XCX's production, Clarence Clarity, and other artists like that. I've really been digging that sound, and this is a very easy way to get it with any patch or any sample. It sounds especially good on hi-hats and claps, and then also giant bass patches like this. Moving on to a bunch of drum-related tricks that you can do. The first one is building on the knowledge that the only drum track that engages the sidechain is the first one. because that's the one people normally put their kick on, and so the Novation engineers figured that would be enough. And it is, if you know about it. So what this means you can do is that, let's say you want to do a big glitch hop, dubstep, or drum and bass track where both the kick and the snare duck the synths. So use sample flip on your first track to do that. So let me just choose a snare. And you can hear how the snare engages the sidechain, which is perfect for heavier bass music. The other benefit that doing that has is that now I've freed up my other 3 drum tracks, so I can do ever more complex drum parts. A way to build on that further is to do what I did with my free drum pack, which is the pack that I'm using here. I'll put a link in the description, and layer a kick and a snare. So for example, I've got this kick here, synthwave kick, and I've got this kick snare layer. And I did this in my DAW. So it's the same kick plus a snare. So I can go like that, alternate them, once again using sample flip. And now I've got my kick and snare hitting at the same time, so I can do some proper 4 on the floor while still leaving the other 3 synth tracks free. So I can do way more complicated percussion or bring in a melodic sample like that horn. Another trick that you can use, and this one definitely feels like a hack, and this was mentioned by Daniel Thompson on the Facebook group, another prolific Novation Circuit user. He mentioned that if you want to use the circuit as a repository of patches, you can actually store double the patches by loading on a pack and then also loading on sessions that have different sounds. And you'll see a little microcosm of this if you start a new session. So let me see if this is one I can erase. Yeah, I've got full Novation Circuit sound packs loaded on here, and yet if you go to the synth, there's your default sound. There are your default sounds right there. Those are stored there within the sessions themselves, within the default sessions, even though technically, if you go around, there's a different sound that's stored here. So if you use that trick for every single session with different patches on every single section, you can effectively double the amount of patches that you can store on this thing. So if that's something that you feel like doing, have at it. Another huge hack recommended by Daniel Thompson is step recording automation. So real quick, I'm gonna just sequence in a very simple little part. Come on. So let's say I want this effect to kick in just for a couple of specific steps. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit record, hold down the step, and turn this parameter, and you see it turns red. And then I'm going to hold down this one, turn that back down. So now, and now you have automation with a lot more control than you get by simply holding down record and twiddling a knob. Another hack, and this is not really a hack, this is actually something that's pretty dumb, but effective. A couple of times I've had my circuit start to freak out on me, and lights would start blinking, especially if I held down shift in one of the patch selection windows. Stuff would start blinking, stuff would start mistriggering, and it was super annoying, and I was going, oh no, is my circuit broken? And I saw the advice online to hit it. Yes, hit it. Like you are in a cartoon with a malfunctioning piece of tech, hitting it makes it better. Percussive maintenance. Like, don't be shy about this either. If you ever have this problem, take your fist and like bonk it pretty good in all the places where it's bugging out, and also replace the batteries. But you have to do both, at least for me. Maybe I'm the only one who's had this work, but I've done this a few times, and I've always had percussive maintenance maintain my circuit. I've never had to actually repair it. Something about hitting it actually does seem to knock things back into place. So don't be shy, bonk the thing. Another hack, this one recommended by Daniel Thompson and backed up by my own experience. If you have a long chord progression or melody or any other kind of musical idea too long to fit just within one set of patterns, write it in halftime and then use microsteps to fill in the gaps. So for instance, if you're making drum and bass at 170 BPM, half that tempo, put this at 85 beats per minute, and then for any faster elements, use your microsteps to fill in those gaps, and you'll be able to get twice the length of patterns. This is a kind of a specific application and won't work for every song and won't be necessary for every song, but it is useful to know about, especially if you want to have long sustained chords without having to use note tie. And while I'm talking about it, microsteps in and of themselves are a bit of a hack for people who aren't familiar with them. If you want to get stuttering hi-hats or glitch effects, microsteps are hugely underrated. And you can also use them to get kind of the J Dilla effect, and I did a whole video on this, so I'll keep this quick, but say I have a normal pattern and I want the snare to hit just a little bit early, what I would do is go back a step, go to gate, select my step, hold down shift, and then shift this to here. Make sure I get rid of the other one. So what you get is that snare hits just a little bit early, and then you can pair that with some hats to really bring out the effect and even delay the middle hats by a bit for some proper lo-fi hip-hop swing. Or you could also use this to get the classic progressive house early snare. So you hear both transients very clearly, like this. A lot of you probably already know about that, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, I've found this tremendously useful, and I recommend that you use microsteps to their fullest. If the rhythms you can make with microsteps aren't wacky enough for you, maybe you want to get into playing tuplets, quintuplets, septuplets, so on and so forth. You can do that on the circuit even without having the musical chops to play them yourself. To unlock the power of quintuplets and septuplets, you're going to need to mess with the length. So count out the number of steps that will lead to 2 cycles of tuplets. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cut it off there. So now if I put a kick on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that sounds perfectly normal. But anything in between here is locked to a quintuplet grid. And do note that you'll need to do this length thing for every single pattern for everything to loop properly and sound pleasing. So let me demonstrate that with the snare as well, because these are part of the same pattern, technically. These got held to that. So now if I want to do some nice quintuplet swing, I can bring in my snare. Sounds normal? Let's bring in the hat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 for kind of the classic quintuplet swing. Or I can take this even further. And yes, that sounds strange and kind of sloppy, but that's kind of the point. And you can do the same with septuplets, which I haven't even really messed around with that much. But if you go back to length and count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's your requisite length right there. And now you are officially locked to a septuplet grid. If you're looking to make some wonky beats or off-kilter rhythms, I highly recommend messing around with tuplets and also checking out Adam Neely's video on them. I'll leave a link for that in the description. And that is it for this video, but I've done more videos about getting the most out of the Novation Circuit. I did one about how to make full songs, that's up here, and one about how to make build-ups and drops effectively down over here. Hopefully you check those out and hit that like button if you found this video helpful, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.